All right, well, thank you guys. Thank you for joining me. This is an open clinic. I sort of reached out last week for any questions that you may have. And the response was fantastic. So thank you for everyone that dropped me a direct message or sent me an email. And I guess it's given me an opportunity to sort of assess what is, lurking in the background for a lot of people, what is sort of front of mind for a lot of people. And of course I had a spectrum of questions and queries and concerns, going from sort of broad brushstrokes to getting in the weeds and the minutiae. And I guess this platform, or this sort of Facebook Live open clinic that I've set up, probably isn't the best place necessarily to get in the minutiae. And I say that because I kind of need to know more about the individual than just a short message on Instagram or Facebook. So I've sort of, with that in mind, I've kind of responded to a couple of those people and said, look, maybe this is best for a one-on-one coaching session. I'm happy to address some of those points generally on a Facebook Live, but to kind of get beneath the surface, there's lots of information that I would need from him or her to kind of get the best outcome and the best solution. So what I've done, I sort of sifted through the questions and sort of ranked them in terms of the prevalence and how often they occurred, and probably how important that information is to the broader demographic. And so I put them in various silos, and I'll talk about those in kind of order of some sort of ranking or priority that I think is relevant. So I had a couple of questions around weight loss. Now the motivation, it was quite interesting and revealing that for each individual, each question that I had from you guys, the motivation or the end result was hopefully weight loss, but the outcome was weight loss, but the motivation was very complex and very sort of different. So there was people that wanted for cosmetics, aesthetic weight loss, for body composition. There was post injury, pre-op. There was a bit of a mixed bag, but I guess that's where I want to start. So thank you for the questions in and around weight loss. And so I just want to break down some of the not myths around weight loss, but I guess give you the basic principles, because I deal with clients every day. I coach clients every day, and what I find is that you need to be aware of and retain the knowledge of certain principles, because there is a bit of a science to it, but there's also another side of it that is very psychological and very behavioral. So we'll get to that in a minute. And you need both. You can't sustain or achieve sustainable weight loss or effective weight loss without knowing the nuts and the bolts and the principles that you need to know to achieve weight loss. But also what I like to call the intangible. You need to know the behavioral stuff, and one affects the other. So it's not enough just to know the nuts and bolts or the tangibles, the metrics or the guidelines or the principles for weight loss. You need to know all the other stuff that's running in the background. So hopefully this answers some of the questions around weight loss, whatever the motivation, whatever the on-ramp or need for weight loss was, whether that's post-injury or pre-operation or surgery or purely cosmetics. It doesn't really matter, but the same principles apply. So the first principle is around thermogenesis. It's an energy equation. It's an energy balance, and I'm sure you've heard it all before about calories in versus calories out. That's the first principle of weight management. There's a bit of a science to it, in the sense that the more calorie, you know, if you expend more calories than you consume, then you're going to equal a reduction in overall fat mass. And conversely, if you're consuming more than you're expending, then it's going to go in the opposite direction. So the only way to kind of quantitatively assess how many calories you're having is really adopt adherence to an app. And that sounds boring and laborious and mundane, but what it actually does, and you don't have to do this for forever and a day, or you don't have to do it to the point where you reach your goal. What we're trying to do is increase our nutritional literacy. And what I mean by that is have a grounded understanding of what calorific value or energy value certain foods have, or the volume of foods have. So without knowing that, you're kind of eating a bit blind, and you might think, oh, you know, arbitrarily, I'm having about 2,000 calories. But truth be known, you're having more in the range of 2,500 or 3,000. And the longer you spend in this sort of misconception about how many calories you're having, you'll never achieve your weight goal. So I've had this time and time again with clients where they go, oh no, I'm pretty sure I'm eating about 1,800 calories, or whatever the figure is that they throw at me. And okay, just out of curiosity and just out of an exercise to find out what you are actually eating, let's just track your calories. Everything you eat, drink other than water, throw it in and see what comes out. And quite often they're way off the mark. And so you go, okay, well, we know what we're playing with now, so we know what to tweak, we know how to edit, we know how to amend your day to now fit in with your target calorie range. And you might only have to do that for a week, 2 weeks. I think the longer you do it, again, it's mundane, it's a bit boring, it's a bit laborious, but the more you do it, just see it as a learning. All the time you're assessing, you're getting constant feedback as the calorie value or the energy value of certain foods, whether it's a tomato, teaspoon of olive oil, an egg, a slice of cheese. So you then get to a point where your nutritional literacy increases, and it becomes almost second nature as to how many calories are on your plate. And then you can get rid of, you know, at some point, if you want to, you can separate from the app and tracking your calories, and it's less important. Once you get into the groove of what it looks like for you to achieve whatever it is, 1,500 calories across the day. So that's the first principle. You can't achieve weight loss without creating a calorie deficit. So we have a level of energy that is required during any one day. So that's based on a number of things. It's based on your basal metabolic rate. So if you were lying in a hospital bed, what are the calories or the energy required to keep you sustained, to keep you alive? So that's a figure, that's a threshold. On top of that is your walking, incidental fitness, thinking, all that sort of non-exercise sort of stuff. So that becomes a slightly higher figure. Now, if you exercise, we need to factor that in. But basically, you'll end up with a figure that is your calorie target. And now you either go below or above that according to your outcome. So if you want to lose weight, you drop 10 to 15%. If you want to increase, then you increase by 15%. And there's a model that you adhere to, and I think that's probably a great discussion for another open live. But anyway, so you can't get around that. You need a calorie deficit. The second is a little bit more cerebral, I think, and it's about timing. And when I work with clients, I don't always talk about quantities and quality of your calories or your nutrition, but I will talk about the timing, because there's often a lot of gold to be had when we look at when we're eating certain foods or when we're eating food in general. So it's going to sound a bit kooky, it's going to sound a bit sort of hocus pocus, but bear with me for a second. So we are incredibly sophisticated, we have incredible advancements in technology, but you and I, when we strip the clothes off and the skin, we're very primal in nature. We have evolved over millions of years to be so. So when we're looking at it through this lens, we are very primal, and we have a synchronization to that big ball of heat outside. So there's this natural order of the day, and I'm sure you've heard the expression circadian rhythm. So you and I are diurnal in nature, in the sense that we're energized during the day and we sleep, we have rest and sleep in the evening. And that coincides with the evolution of the sun in any 24-hour period. So we have an overarching clock that governs what hormones are on, which operating system is on, influenced by a certain set of hormones. But each organ also has its own clock. So this governing clock, this overarching clock, is a suprachiasmatic nucleus. You don't really need to know that. But then each organ, be it heart, lungs, digestive system, has its own clock, and they don't necessarily sync 100% to our overarching clock. So what does this mean? It means that our digestive, because we're talking about nutrition, we're talking about weight loss, our digestive system has its own clock, and it's influenced by two things: external factors such as the sun and when we eat. So that's really important. So consider our digestive enzymes, consider our digestive system shift workers. The moment we have something to eat other than water, so it could be your breakfast cereal in the morning, or your slice of toast, or your up and go, whatever it is, those shift workers, your digestive enzymes, clock on. Then they're primed, they're optimized, they're functioning for about 8 to 10 hours. After that 8 to 10 hour window, their productivity or effectiveness or optimization falls off the edge of the cliff. So it's not a slow decline in their functionality or their optimization, it's actually a rapid drop off. So if you're asking of your digestive system beyond that 8 to 10 hour window, you're really setting us up for metabolic disorder. So how does this affect weight loss? Well, we need to lean into our physiology and accept that we do have a circadian rhythm, and we do have a stop clock on our productivity and our optimization of our digestive enzymes. So let's lean into that. Let's work with that. So just something to bear in mind before you get into the quality of the nutrition, before you get into the quantity of your nutrition, i.e. the volume, let's look at timing, because with all my clients, that's the first thing we look at. And most of my clients, probably 95%, have a fairly elongated feeding window, i.e. 12, 13, 14. I've had some clients who are 17, 18 hours. And just by tweaking the extremities, the ends of the days or the starts of the days, which sounds like a full-on thing or full-on exercise, but it's really not. You can make some small tweaks either end, and you can shave hours off your day. So I worked with someone on Tuesday, and we looked at his feeding window, and he was sort of in the range of 12 to 13 hours. And just by a little tweak in the morning, we halved it. So now he's got a 6.5 hour feeding window, which makes his non-feeding window very alluring from a longevity perspective. So two things are happening. We're creating a truncated feeding window. So we're leaning into our physiology. We know that they're optimized for 8 to 10 hours, so let's lean into that. More than that, we're encroaching on our capacity or capability to digest food. Our digestive system at that point should be resting, restoring, getting ready for the next day. We're encroaching on that beyond that 10-hour window. But the negative space, i.e. when we're not eating, is a beautiful space to be too, in terms of longevity and health promotion and stuff. So that's a wonderful thing that we can do straight out the gate. Let's look at timing. So first principle is you can't, to achieve effective weight loss, you've got to create a calorie deficit. The second principle is looking at the timing. Can we sync to our circadian rhythm? Can we truncate that feeding window so we're sitting around about 8 to 10? And you don't have to do this overnight. You can do this over a 2, 3, 4 week period. If your feeding window is, 14 hours, it's not to say that you have to go to 8 hours tomorrow. Just make those small edits over a series. It can be a 6-month project if you want. I think having that knowledge and that understanding of that we should be working with our natural order. Yes, we're sophisticated. Yes, we're cultured, but we're still very primal, and that's fundamentally, the essence of us. We're primal beings. We're part of nature, and we do have this natural order. We do have this circadian rhythm. So let's work with that. And I'll get back to this on the second subject, and it'll be a recurring theme in a lot of what I talk about and when I work with clients. But that second principle, let's talk about timing and circadian rhythm. The third principle looks at the quality of your nutrients, the quality of your calories. Yes, we need to create a calorie deficit, but what are the foods that we can have on our plate that really blow the door open wide for weight loss? A big part of weight management is the auto-regulation or the control of your hormones. So one hormone in particular, cortisol, which gets, having a insulin, complete memory blank. So when we eat sugar in the form of carbohydrates or complex, simple sugars, whether it's a slice of bread or a Tim Tam or a sweet potato, broccoli, the family of carbohydrates is incredibly diverse and somewhat confusing because, we've got refined sugars and we've got, confectionery in one end of the spectrum, and then we've got broccolini and carrots and beetroot and all the yummy, beautiful stuff that we know we should be eating more of. So it gets a bit confusing when people talk about a low carbohydrate diet or no carbs. It's like, well, does that mean everything? No, it doesn't. I think there's a way to be low carb or even moderate carb or no carb, but still have, people who are advocates of the keto diet, they would do well to kind of include some of the, the cruciferous or the lower end of the starchy carb, that you can still have a beautiful diet and a diverse diet even on a low carb diet. So anyway, but that's probably for another open clinic. So basically what I was saying about it's a hormonal complex as well. So when we digest carbohydrates in all their form, they will have a consequence on our insulin. So when we have elevated insulin, so the body detects sugar in our bloodstream, spurts out insulin from our pancreas, and we get elevated insulin. If we have that elevated insulin, it's like the door is shut on the liberation of fat from stored fat cells. So to lose weight, as you can imagine, we need to set up a predicament where fat is being liberated from stored fat cells to be able to be metabolized. If we don't have that first action, it's somewhat impossible for your body to metabolize the fat that we have in stored fat. So we need to be able to liberate, we need to be able to mobilize fat from fat stores. When the situation is that we have elevated insulin, the door is kept shut on that stored fat in your fat cells. So one way to kind of at least liberate and get that door wider open for fat loss is to reduce the amount of insulin and consequently the amount of carbohydrates. So that's looking at the quality of your nutrition. So first principle, thermogenesis, energy equation, energy in, energy out. We need to create a calorie deficit. Second principle is the timing. Let's lean into our circadian rhythm. There's some big wins just in that. The first thing I do with my clients is we look at the feeding window. Can we truncate it? Let's not change anything else. Let's see what the wins are there. They're normally quite significant. Third principle is let's blow the door as wide open as we can on weight loss. So let's reduce insulin. Let's promote the liberation, mobilization, and metabolism of fat from stored fat sites. Now, the fourth principle, and it's not really a principle, well, I guess it's a principle, but it's not the fourth in order of ranking or importance or priority, because it kind of sits behind all those principles that I explained, the first, second, and the third. So it kind of sits in you know, if it was a pie chart, on one side would be the mechanics, first principle, second principle, third principle. On the other side is all the behavioral stuff, which is incredibly complex, incredibly sophisticated, and each person is very different to the next. And I know this because I've been coaching for quite some time, and nobody has the same story about behaviors around food, attraction to food, proclivities to certain types of foods, emotional eating, post-trauma. There's a real bag of behavioral stuff that is attached to food. So as a coach, I work on the nuts and bolts. Most of my clients have a pretty firm understanding of what you need to achieve effective and sustained weight loss. But then we work on the other side of the pie chart, which is what I call the intangible, the behavioral stuff. And that just takes time. We're dismantling old habits whilst building new habits. And building new habits can happen relatively quickly. Depends on diligence, depends on desire for change, desire for that goal. So if the desire is strong and you're comfortable and committed to making change, then the new habit will form relatively quickly. But the dismantling of old habits can take time, and they sort of wrestle for front stage. But just know that a couple of things are happening, and I think this is important to kind of communicate before I step off weight loss. So we have, as I said, we're primal, we're very complex, sophisticated underneath our skin. We're a melting pot of biochemistry and hormones, and as you can imagine, it's a sophisticated setup. Just know two things that I find really, really, really useful when it comes to weight loss. One, the digestive system starts in our mouth. So on our tongue, there's a suite of neurons that pick up the senses: umami, sugar, salt, sweet. Oh, I said sweet. Sour, bitter. You can inform those neurons to get more excited about a certain taste, sensation. So if you're constantly eating sweet things, confectionery, you will, I guess, increase the proliferation of those neurons on your tongue. Conversely, if you're eating lots of umami foods and meat and savory, the same things happen. So you can sort of steer your physiology in a certain direction. You can increase the proliferation and the attractiveness or the allure of either savory or sweet. And you can do that according to your health outcomes and your weight management. Further down the digestive system, when we get into the gut, our gut has neurons, just as our brain has neurons. And those neurons detect certain macronutrients, whether it's sugar. And if it's sugar, in any of its forms. So whether it's in its crude form, like a teaspoon of sugar in your tea, or whether it's a more complex form in a pizza, let's say. The neurons that detect sugar in your gut pick that up, and they send a direct message, like a hotline, from your gut to your brain. It's called the vagus nerve. It's a beautiful piece of wiring. And what that does, it sends a message to release dopamine, which is a neurotransmitter. And that dopamine is the neurotransmitter, or the chemical for reward and anticipation. Anticipation, then reward. So it's the thing that keeps us moving forward to things that we enjoy. But too much of that thing creates a sort of a habit, a craving, an addiction. So it's the thing that moves us towards the fridge when we want ice cream or chocolate or alcohol or stimulants or cocaine or sex. Dopamine isn't bad, but in the modern setting, given that the prevalence of sugar in our supermarket aisles, in our corner stores, it can set up a pretty wonky system and works against us. So historically, this system of anticipation and reward, and this feeling of feeling great, has served us well for thousands and hundreds of thousands of years. In 2021, it doesn't serve us very well at all when we're looking at the lens of our food landscape. So eating sugar gets picked up by the neurons in our gut, sends a message via the vagus nerves, releases dopamine. We get this anticipation. There's a spurt of dopamine on our way to the fridge to eat that chocolate. We eat the chocolate, there's another spurt of dopamine that gives us that sense of pleasure and reward. That is then followed very quickly, almost simultaneously, by a feeling of pain. Not a physical pain, but a feeling of loss, a feeling of emotional pain, if you like, which loops back around and enables us to go in and have another bite of chocolate or ice cream or sex or cocaine or whatever the vice is. And it sort of habit forms and creates addictions and cravings, and sort of it's a bit of a merry-go-round. So one thing that we can do, which serves both ends of the digestive system, and it comes down to neurons, is to simply remove or reduce the sugar. I mean, this can this can happen over a long period of time. It doesn't have to happen overnight, and I wouldn't advise it to happen overnight if you've got a bit of a craving or a sweet tooth. But by simply replacing the sugary foods with something more savory, you're going to change the composition of the neurons on your tongue. You're also going to send a different message to the neurons in your gut. So your neurons in your gut, when things start coming down the pipe, go, okay, what are we playing with here? Okay, we've got some protein, we've got a bunch of amino acids, we've got some omega-3s, so they're eating some protein, they've got some fat on there. Okay, I've had enough of all that, I've got the right constellation or the right demographic of amino acids. Tell the brain, shut off eating. You've had enough, you're full. That system, that loop system, doesn't work when we're consuming carbohydrates. You're in a different dopamine, reward, pleasure system. You don't get that pleasure and reward when you're chewing on chicken breast, let's be honest, or sticks of broccoli. But what it does is, if you're eating those types of foods, the amino acid constellation and the omega-3 constellation, your body gets that message to shut off, stop eating. And so it's very hard to overeat on protein. You compare eating a bowl of ice cream or chips or crackers compared to chicken breast. It's very hard to overeat or overconsume on chicken breast, whereas the system that is at play with your consumption of chips or ice cream or chocolate is a different system, and it keeps you coming back for more. So I hope that gives you some understanding of the nuts and bolts of the mechanics of weight loss. first principle, second principle, third principle, and then running parallel to that, if you look at it as a pie chart, you've got your mechanics, your nitty gritty, your tangible, your metrics, but then you've got your intangible, your behavioral stuff, your habits, your proclivities, and that's the stuff that is difficult to work with. But if you're working with someone who is reasonably empathetic, compassionate, and understanding of the mechanics of that side of the pie chart, then you're on the right path. All right, so I hope that answers some of the questions that I've had around weight loss. Hopefully some of you are still with me. The other question that I have, and I think it ranks very highly when we're talking about health and longevity, is sleep. So I often say to my clients that nutrition or sleep is either ranked number 1 or number 2, and they can oscillate from gold or silver or vice versa. It depends what your starting point is. So I've had clients that come to me and they sleep consistently for 3 or 4 hours a day. And so at that point, I don't want to hear what you're eating necessarily. I mean, I do, but let's play with what we're playing with. Let's work out how to get you better sleep, more rest, more sleep. And of course, all these things are bi-directional. So poor sleep means poor nutrition choices the next day. But let's see what we can do in terms of moving you forward in a positive direction with more sleep. So, and conversely, if you're sleeping 7 or 8 hours and you feel relatively rested, but you're eating Tim Tams all day, then obviously nutrition ranks number 1. Let's work on how to create a better environment and ecosystem for your nutrition. So I don't think one is more important than the other. It depends where you are as an individual. So I had a lady, Karen, who claimed to be sleep deprived, and I've worked with clients. Had a beautiful client, maybe she's watching, well, probably not now because she's in France, but she came to me with habitually only sleeping for 3 or 4 hours. Now she sleeps like a baby for 7 or 8, and it's been a real game changer. So I just want to touch on how to improve sleep, and there's a number of different mechanisms, but I think one goes back to what I was talking about under the second principle of weight loss, and that's working with our circadian rhythm. So reminder that our circadian rhythm is the natural order that occurs to us and around us in a 24-hour period. And within that 24-hour period, you and I have different operating systems. We're designed to be alert, have muscle tone, elevated heart rate, elevated blood pressure during the day. We're designed for that. We're designed to be alert, cognitive function improvement, memory recall. We're designed to be on. Let's put it that way. We're designed to be on, primed. And that behind that operating system is a bunch of hormones that drive that inform that to happen. Now, the opposing operating system that kicks in early evening and through the night is the off, if you like. Very simplistic, very crude. We've got an on and an off. The off is informed by a bunch of hormones, just as the on is. The on is a sympathetic, the off is a parasympathetic. Both very normal, both very essential for optimal health and function. When we get too much, and maybe this is creeping into stress a little bit, and that's probably for another clinic, when we get too much of the on and it starts to encroach on the off, then cracks can appear. But the signal that we get to inform the off, so the rest and restore and rejuvenation, is by a hormone called melatonin. Melatonin are actually two hormones, a chemical and a hormone. Just touching on the hormone for the moment, the hormone that induces rest and sleep is a hormone called melatonin. I'm sure you've heard of melatonin. That gets triggered by you and I being up around sunrise, there or thereabouts, and receiving photons to the eyes. We have receptors in our eyes called melanopsin receptors that inform that there's light in the air, we're up, we should be alert, and so it triggers the on. And it stalls the release of melatonin. So as long as we're looking at bright light, we're going to stall or impede the release of melatonin. But what it does, when we're looking at that early morning sun, when the sun is low in the sky, it's come above the horizon, we're getting photons hitting our melanopsin receptors. What it does, it creates a countdown timer. And that countdown timer goes for about 12 to 14 hours, around which time our body releases melatonin that induces restfulness, and sleep. So the best thing we can do for our sleep is do something at the other end of the day, is to get outside, whether that's go for a walk, get on your balcony, get on your veranda, and get some light hitting your, I'm not saying look directly into the sun, but get some light on your body and on your eyes. Wearing sunnies, driving in a car, looking at the sun through panes of glass, yes, it's beneficial, but the factor that you're playing with is 100 times, 1,000 times less than if you're actually standing outside with no panes of glass or glasses to impede. So that's the hormone at play. As I mentioned, there's a chemical at play too, and that chemical is adenosine. So we have adenosine receptors that collect adenosine. Adenosine accumulates over the course of the day. And when that adenosine hits a certain threshold, bam, it induces restfulness and sleep. So these two things are running parallel, this hormone melatonin and this gradual build up across the course of the day of adenosine. When they hit a certain threshold, bang, you get this overwhelming desire to rest and sleep. Caffeine sits on the receptors of adenosine and blocks adenosine jumping on those receptors. So if we're having coffee, particularly if we're having coffee throughout the day and into the late or even early afternoon, late afternoon, we're blocking the accumulation of that adenosine to hit that threshold to induce restfulness and sleep. So bear in mind that caffeine has a half-life of 6 hours and a quarter life of 12 hours. So if you're having your last coffee at 12 o'clock, at 6 p.m, when you're starting to unwind, hopefully, you've got half the amount of caffeine in your bloodstream. At 12 midnight, you've got a quarter of the amount of caffeine in your bloodstream. So if you're having trouble falling asleep, then I would recommend assessing how much coffee you're having and, importantly, when you're having that coffee. And there are some supplements. I'm not a doctor, I'm not prescribing, but if you are having trouble with sleep, there's apigenin, which is a flavonoid common in a lot of plants, that helps to reduce anxiety and the excitatory kind of element to us all. L-theanine, again, helps to reduce anxiety, helps to promote GABA, which is a sort of the calming neurotransmitter. And just look at coffee, chamomile, all those types of things. Obviously exercise during the day helps us sleep better at night. But yeah, getting out early and getting some early morning sun on our eyes, monitoring how much coffee and when we're having it, and then if you need that extra supplementation, again, I'm not a doctor, I'm not prescribing, but L-theanine, even magnesium and apigenin. And probably we're getting close to, we are over time, but I just want to, I had a beautiful question I just want to circle back to that because it's something that's sort of been front of mind actually for me, and I need to look into it. So I had a wonderful question that came in last night. Should people give back when in good health by donating blood? And I think absolutely. I had a wonderful story on the news a couple of weeks ago of a guy that's, he got to his, I forget the number, maybe 800th donation of blood. I personally, last time I checked, can't give blood because I've had tattoos, lived in the UK during certain periods of my life when mad cow was a thing, or CJV or whatever it's called, CJC, the human version of mad cow, and so I'm at risk, and B, I've had tattoos. But I definitely, I don't know what brought my attention to it, but it's definitely something I want to look into and see if those rules still apply. So I hope you found that of some interest. I guess some key take-homes are, when we're looking at weight management, cellular health, longevity, there's some big wins to be had from assessing your sleep, getting improved sleep, eating predominantly natural and unprocessed, exercising most days if you can, and dissecting that a little bit further, looking to include some resistance training and maybe 1 or 2 high intensity sessions, and maybe fasting as well. Fasting is profound on our cellular health and longevity. So who would have thought actually that not eating promotes an incredible positive cascade of physiological benefits. So they would be my in a nutshell, what can we do to improve health, immunity, resilience, and longevity? Let's be on this planet for as long as we can, being as healthy as we can. Let's eat predominantly natural and unprocessed. Let's fast occasionally. Let's exercise. Let's look at resistance training and some high intensity exercise from time to time. And treasure our sleep. Optimize our sleep. One thing I didn't talk about with sleep is improving your sleep hygiene. We talked about at the start of the day, and some supplementation sort of 60 minutes before sleep or jumping into bed. There's some other little things that we can do at the end of the day. We can get off devices. These devices, well, not this one, this is a camera, but the computer and your phone, your iPad, your tablet, whatever, emits a blue light. And you remember how I was saying that melanopsin receptors in our eyes are on the hunt for blue light. So if they're being doused in blue light, it's suppressing or stalling melatonin. You remember how I said it's kind of binary in that sense, that the light that hits your melanopsin receptors in the early morning, it literally stalls the release of melatonin. So we want melatonin later on in the day. So when we're looking at our screens that are emitting blue light, we're telling our physiology, remember that we're primal, we're not evolved to be looking at screens. Maybe that'll evolve over time, but for now, you're sending a clear message that the sun is still up. Your melanopsin receptors don't differentiate between sunlight and your iPhone. So curtailing the time at which you look at screens will really help. Hot and cold showers, finishing on a cold, moderating your temperature in your bedroom, 17 to 19 degrees is fairly optimal. So a cool room. What else can you do? Earplugs, blackout curtains. Put as much energy, focus and diligence into your sleep as you might do going to the gym. I've had countless clients that, they go to the gym, which involves getting changed, getting their water bottle, going in the car, swiping in, signing in, having a shower, but their sleep is terrible. I was like, hold the phone on the exercise, have a week or 2 off the exercise, and apply that diligence, apply that focus on restoring good quality sleep. And we want about 7 to 8 hours of good quality sleep. Having said that, I haven't had 7 to 8 hours good quality sleep for a few years. I've got a couple of young kids, but I do as much as I can to mitigate that. By going to bed earlier really helps. But kids aside, there's certainly some like good sleep hygiene versus poor sleep hygiene. So really assessing that. All right, thank you for your time. Thank you for all your questions. Keep them coming. I'm going to do this on a weekly basis, I think. So keep those questions coming. Really appreciate it. Have a good day, and I'll speak to you soon.